everyone, welcome to The Field Between. I'm Yasmin.
I'm Ahmed.
And it's Monday night. We're coming live.
It's President's Day.
It's President's Day, that's right.
How did you celebrate?
I just got back from New York, and I celebrated by seeing my adorable little niece.
Were you in Queens?
This morning? I was not in Queens.
To visit where the president grew up and where he's from?
No, I wasn't.
Oh.
I thankfully don't associate New York with Trump, though there's obviously a strong connection.
Yeah, he's a New York guy.
Yeah, well, he's kind of like been shunned by New York, but he is in origin a New York guy. And there's still a Trump Tower.
And you're a New York guy.
I am a New York guy. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was home this weekend for my sister's 30th birthday, which was really fun. So a lot of good family time. Also saw 2 old friends from different parts of life, so that was nice.
Long-time friends.
Long-time friends.
They're not old.
No, they're not.
Okay.
We've been friends for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a little tired, but
You're tired?
I'm feeling good. Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you? How was your weekend? Did you miss me?
Yeah. I kind of, I was noticed the other day, I was getting ready and doing stuff, and I just don't speak. When you know what I'm saying?
Well, that
Which
makes
is
sense because you're alone.
I'm just by myself. I don't really say a word.
I mean, that was the same thing for me because my parents weren't home and I was staying at their place.
It's kind of like a silent retreat. Isn't it weird?
Yeah. I mean, I think it means that even more than normal, I was just had stuff playing all the time, which I also don't love. So there was noise, just not my voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then last night I was coming back from the gym, and then a neighbor and friend of ours had texted me and was like, "Oh, would you teach me how to make chai?" Which I was happy to do because I was kind of lonely. And they came over and I taught them how to make chai. And then while I was on my way back from the gym, I'd actually run into a different friend who was downtown for a different reason. And they ended up coming to also have chai with a group of their friends after they saw a movie.
I love that.
So it was actually kind of nice. It really lifted my spirits.
It's also so nice when you really love live somewhere because you're running into people. That's a nice level of having settled somewhere.
Yeah.
Seeing people without planning it.
Yeah, I love that. It's nice to have those kind of moments because it just it makes it feel a lot more like home.
And you had the cafe the day before, so you were busy chaiing it up all weekend.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. We've got, if you're in Pittsburgh, we've got a big fundraiser / just kind of educational event for Sudan next Saturday, which we're really looking forward to.
Yeah. Most of our listeners are not in Pittsburgh.
That's true, statistically. But if you're one of the special few, come on out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Ramadan is coming up. Ramadan starts March 1st. Mm-hmm. So I always find it really helpful. And one thing that I absolutely love is, even though I don't usually make my goals, is the practice we've established of sitting and kind of planning for the month intentionally a little bit. Mm-hmm. It just really helps me, kind of go into it and think about what I want to get out of it. So we need to have that little meeting soon. And then also just now that we've got the cafe, figure out how we want to use the space for the month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do need to figure that out.
But that's something I'm looking forward to.
It'll be fun.
Work is still crushing, but I'm kind of it's all right. I'll just continue.
Man, looking for work is crushing. It's not good out there.
I know.
It's bad.
I'm sorry.
You think I made a mistake?
I don't actually.
Oh,
I was just talking to my future
husband?
Our future brother-in-law. No. Oh. Our future brother-in-law about this, and I really don't. I feel like he did the right thing, and inshallah, I think eventually something will work out.
What did he say? He said I made a mistake?
No.
Oh.
He was like, yeah. I was saying, I hope Ahmed doesn't feel like he made a mistake.
Oh.
And he was saying, based on his love for you, he's always so confident talking about you, which is so sweet. He was like, no, he doesn't feel that way. I was like, oh, good. I'm guessing this is based on the conversation you had last time you saw him, which was...
Well, it's complicated because in some ways it feels like I may be screwed, but I also do recognize that the situation that I was in was really unsustainable. So it just, it sucks.
It sucks that there isn't Yeah, that it will take a while, probably. But I feel like, as we've talked about before, just like burnout is very real. And there was multiple factors, but I feel like we did the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, anyway, there's things that we can do if we got to in terms of like making money and stuff. So,
like what?
Like, I mean, you could get like a very part-time job if you want. I don't think that's necessary anytime soon, but like by April, you know.
That's really just a month and a half.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to intern at Doge.
Please don't intern at Doge. No, I think you should be a barista because I feel like you already have all these coffee skills. I think you would really enjoy that. And you'd like meet people, and I feel like that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Especially for that one coffee shop that you really love in Pittsburgh. That'd be cool.
Yeah, I don't think they're hiring.
No, something like that. Defer is hiring. But anyway, these are future thoughts, not current realities.
Yeah. Well, I had some videos queued up, but they're not playing for some reason except for one. So I guess I'll just play the one. Like
your Wi-Fi's not working, or they're just not?
No, the photo app and on the phone is just not working. It's only playing this one video for some reason.
It has determined this is the video you must focus on.
I guess so.
I watched so much dopey comedy, like filling the void of, not a void. I had a great weekend, but like, you know, when I was alone.
Yeah. What did you watch?
Some people I found that I really liked. Have you heard of Osama? He's
Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, no, not that one.
Yeah, I've heard of you been watching some videos.
No, astaghfirullah.
Interesting.
No one come for me. No, he's a Bangladeshi Canadian actually comedian. He's really funny. He's based out of New York.
Yeah, I think I've seen this guy.
You probably like have seen him like pop up.
Yeah.
So I watched him and I don't know, other people. It's the only person whose name I remember that I actually like stood out to me a little bit.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. Oh, Cyrus was really funny. He's or actually sorry, I think they go by they. They're non-binary and Persian American, and they've got a really sweet like shtick with their dad, who is basically very supportive, and a lot of people seem to like watching for that reason, which is cute. Anyway, those are my videos. Let's hear about your videos.
Okay.
Or video.
This is a random video that came up. I'm guessing it's like one of those Pentecostal church type deals where someone goes up and then they repent or whatever. They ask for God's blessing in front of the congregation. Mm-hmm. And
oh no, they go into details about like what they did?
It's in Australia.
Okay.
Is there anything you wanted to renounce?
I want to renounce a generational curse. My child is autistic. And he has no brains at all. Like we've tried every.
Oh, that's so mean. That's not even funny. That's just mean.
No, it's a bad thing. But for some reason, the fact that he's Australian makes it funny. The accent, yeah. Well, generational curse.
I don't know much about like Australia or New Zealand. Honestly, I don't really think about them.
Other videos with people with similar accents. It was I had some videos of Elon Musk's dad, Errol Musk. I don't know if you've seen him ever.
No.
Awful guy. God damn, so terrible.
Yeah.
Even though like him and his son are at odds, you're just like, fuck, okay, I can see
the connection.
Where he gets it. I mean, the guy still refers to Zimbabwe as like Rhodesia. He's just like, oh, it's such an awful moment, and like Mandela getting out of jail and like becoming president of South Africa. Like he's just like talks about it as a traumatic thing, and like how all these black people like finally not having to deal with apartheid anymore was just like one of the worst things to ever happen to him. Some
sore ass losers, man. Some really pathetic sore losers.
I'll show you some other time, but like some of his interviews are just like
wild.
Like I'm like, this is a hateful person.
Yeah.
Like,
well, his son,
can't imagine.
Yeah, you're right. His son definitely didn't fall too far from the tree.
Yeah.
But they didn't spend enough time with them. So these the two eldest boys, Kimball's eldest son and Elon's eldest son, have declared themselves to be women.
So I know, that was actually my next question.
Both my sons, eldest sons, have declared themselves to be women.
So they were born a man and now they identify
That's
as
bullshit,
a woman.
You know.
How do you don't agree, hey?
It's bullshit, yeah. Bullshit. You know, South Africa had never been impressed
Yeah.
with Obama's approach. We realized we'd learned Obama's a queer married to a man who dresses as a woman. We'd all learned that. It's not common knowledge, that.
Michelle Obama's a man.
Of course. You don't know that?
I didn't know that, no.
Well, now you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joan Rivers mentioned it publicly, and she was dead 2 weeks later, by the way.
You think
Oh, yes.
they axed her, eh?
The actor, yeah. So that's common knowledge. You can look it up on any internet thing.
I'm sure.
And Michelle Obama's a man. Obviously, they've got, got pictures of her in tracksuits with a 9-inch slong hanging down her leg. It's a leg.
Yeah.
Rough.
Okay, what are we going to talk about today?
I've got some news roundups. I think I'll start with a kind of serious one because I don't have like too much to say about it, but I did just want to acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably more than one openly gay imam, but this is the only one I have heard of.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, his name was Muhsin Hendricks.
Mm-hmm.
He's in South Africa, and he just like gave a lot of hope to a lot of people. I'm not very plugged in or aware of like the South African Muslim scene, but I had definitely heard of him. He was on his way to, it seems like, perform a same-sex marriage, Muslim marriage, and he was gunned down in what seems to be like a deliberate targeting.
Definitely.
Yeah. So yeah, like very, very sad. I think that this is actually a quote that he said: "The need to be authentic was greater than the fear to die." So, I mean, I think heartbreakingly, maybe he wouldn't have been shocked at the kind of level of risk that he was exposing himself to in being an openly gay imam. Though he practiced for years. But yeah, just really thinking with like all the queer Muslims that we know and love, especially in this moment, it always sucks, particularly when you have like multiple intersections of things that are being deeply repressed in a moment that it felt like we were just starting to make progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was that. And then this was just so horrific. There was a trans man named Sam Nordquist who went missing. He was from Minnesota. His family's trying to find him. You saw this, right?
Yeah.
And his body was discovered upstate. It looks like he was tortured for several weeks by a group of people.
2 months.
2 months.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had not much to say about that either, except for that it also just felt really weird. I mean, obviously they're like totally different parts of the world, but just felt weird that they happened so close together. And just thinking about the very real consequences of rhetoric and actions against trans people and queer people more generally, that they have consequences and we really have to protect each other.
Yeah. Just on Imam Muhsin, I have been seeing a lot of posts memorializing him, and like even some videos and testimonials of people who were part of the masjid that he led. It seems like a space for a lot of like queer Muslims who found a space that they like felt was open to them, and that they were looking for, and that's really sweet. And it's very heartbreaking that that he's gone. I will say, just the comments on the videos and stuff, I know it's the internet and stuff, was just like so I don't know what the word is. It's just like,
I haven't seen
hateful.
that. I'm sorry to hear that. I guess you're right. It's not surprising, but that's still so upsetting.
Hateful shit. And it just reminds you that, I mean, ultimately, how people choose to practice, and a lot of these beliefs are not beliefs that are actually rooted in Islam, where whether or not you believe, like Islam says that homosexuality or whatever is wrong, it does not instruct you to go and kill or hate anyone.
Right. Or to celebrate someone's murder.
Or to celebrate someone's murder.
And I think it's a good thing to distinguish. Just to be clear, we both think that queerness and Islam are fully compatible. But even if you don't, right, there's other aspects here that should dictate your conduct.
But just seeing the comments and just like seeing the hatefulness, I'm like, this is, I don't know. I don't know what to say other than it's just like very troubling, and it's heartbreaking. I was reminded I think I mentioned this to you as I was reminded when and I forgot to mention it because we talked about the military trans ban and that executive order.
Here in the U.S.
Yeah, but I've been thinking about it a lot recently. I was reminded of the open letter that all these imams signed back in like May of 2023, or it was like August of 2020, whatever.
That sounds right.
Yeah. And the language is, strikingly, like it's got some parallels, right? Where it talks about this, dangerous LGBTQ ideology, and like the trans military ban talks about dangerous gender ideology that is being promulgated by the left and, being forced on people, right? So, in the open letter, they say it's been forced down people's throats in the schools and whatnot, and that, they want to be able to have more control over their kids and whether or not they're indoctrinated in this way. And I'm like, these things are very parallel to each other. And we're seeing, although that letter was signed by a bunch of American imams, they are imams with a lot of notoriety across, not just the US, but abroad, right? These guys go on speaking tours in the Middle East. They visit people in North Africa. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like they're all over the place. So they have influence elsewhere in the world, especially in English speaking countries.
Completely.
And yeah, so I feel like, the violence that you saw against Sam, although it happened, I think this happened like last year, right?
No.
2023, the guy who was tortured, isn't that what this is a case that was...
Oh, I thought that he died recently.
I'm not sure. Look that up while I finish this point. But regardless, this has been like a long time brewing, right? Like just kind of creating an atmosphere where violence against this group of people is okay. And I think it's incredibly shameful and something that Muslims and Arabs, and well, I'll just say especially Muslims who are in the U.S. and are not vocally advocating for the rights of LGBTQ, and that includes trans people. It doesn't not include trans people. The rights of those people and like fighting alongside for the rights of those people. Like honestly, you should be ashamed of yourself because again, we've said it on the show before. The queer community has been like one of the most outspoken communities against what's happening in Gaza.
It's really incredible. The kind of activism in the queer community in the U.S. is just like one of the most mobilized communities that there is. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
And just like very, yeah.
And there are Muslims, and again, like I can't say for sure these are Muslims in the U.S. or whatever. They're posting in English. Who are saying there's no such thing as a gay imam. Like he deserved what he got. Like there's no such thing as a queer mosque. There's no such thing as blah, 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 blah. I'm like, I know I feel strong enough in like my relationship to the faith and like in my own like spirituality. I'm like, this is to me so far away from Islam that I don't feel like my own faith being undermined, but I do feel my connection to other people kind of being undermined.
Yeah.
A little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, this was recent.
It was? Okay.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know why. Okay. I must have seen something
Well,
else.
I think it was confusing because like the family hadn't seen him for a while and then the body's discovered, but it looks like they found the body pretty soon after he was killed.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know why. I think I must have gotten confused. I thought I'd seen that it was the court case was finally moving forward and they had new evidence or something.
Yeah, no, I don't even know if there is a court case yet.
Yeah.
But you're right, it was like months. Yeah, adding on to what you were saying, I also think, look, I don't want to shirk responsibility because hate has multiple origins. And so, I'm not trying to like say like, oh, this homophobia is us like copying larger American culture. But if you start to use far right language, I think it is worth doing like a self audit to be like, am I being driven by, just the general culture around me, and like, is that taking precedence over my faith? I mean, as a religious studies scholar, I guess wearing a slightly different hat, I don't believe that there are articulations of religion that are outside of a cultural context. That doesn't mean that I don't believe in a higher power, but I just think that like we live in a cultural context, therefore. But yeah, having said that, it's similar to what we said about that letter, the navigating differences. What was the stupid thing they called it? Something like that. The letter from the imams. Just like it sounded a lot like Ron DeSantis. And I was like, really? Like this is your, like, it's so clear where you got this language from. It's like so embarrassing.
Yeah.
The fact that there are people who are queer Muslims who still want to be connected to their faith and worship in public is so admirable. And to like have so much hate for that, but to not have like the same, not even a fraction of the same anger for like all the sexual abuse scandals in our community from straight imams that get swept under the rug, or like all of the other hypocrisies from imams in our community.
Yeah.
I mean, we know a case of an imam who was accused of domestic violence in North Carolina who just got reassigned to a different mosque. Like these things are very common, and they don't generate the same kind of sustained internet outrage. They stay very hush hush behind, like you talk in code about it. It's not the kind of stuff that gets viral.
Yeah.
So yeah, there just seems like such an obvious hypocrisy there.
If you erased his sexuality from like the story and it got out that an imam had been shot, like people would be like, this guy's a martyr, right? They'd be talking about him as a martyr.
100%. And some queer Muslims have been actually.
And
very
he should,
sweet.
This guy, like, I mean, especially with what you said earlier, right? If he can kind of say like, it's more important for me to live honestly than and die, like that. It outweighs, death in this world. That is a stronger sign of faith than like most people, like by far. Especially like you said, the people who are adopting the language of like a post-colonial sort of thoughts about sexuality and language and all that, and like have all these rigid definitions of what is and isn't allowed. These people don't question where their actual faith or their belief comes from, right? Like, why do you believe what you believe? Like, are you Muslim because you like sat and thought about it and thought about God and, like really like tried to understand the tradition and like came up with your own beliefs, and that includes I hate gay people and that's what God instructs me to do? Or do you already just hate gay people and you hang out with some Muslims and you're Muslim adjacent? Or do you just believe what your parents believed and they never questioned or like really intellectually thought about it? Like what the fuck is your actual relationship with Islam? Because it certainly sounds like this imam who dedicated his life to opening a space for people to worship
at great personal risk,
despite the danger that was known to him. That to me sounds like a martyr. Yeah,
no, that's so real. Like if you're just out here being a little keyboard warrior and you're not also like doing community work, like, I mean, then really it's a good time to kind of pause and be like, oh, like what is my relationship with community?
Yeah.
And what did it mean for this person to have such tremendous sacrifice? And I really do believe that, I mean, I hesitate to say this because I ultimately hope that everyone comes to the same conclusion that we have, that there just like is no issue with being queer and Muslim. But I also do feel like we could move the needle on more people being like, I don't know, or I'm confused, or I haven't thought about it before. And I recognize that this man gave everything for his faith and his community, you know? But maybe that's not even helpful because it just kind of allows like a softer homophobia. I'm not really sure.
I don't think it's a problem. I mean, probably is not the time to talk about it. And I also don't know enough to talk about it. I'd love to have someone on who can actually have like a good conversation about this. But I do know queer Muslims who take a very intellectual approach of like struggling to reconcile a religion and the spirit, like what is said in the text with living life as Muslims, right? And it's not for me to say like what is right and what is wrong. Like, everyone's kind of on their own journey, and I would love to hear from people and understand the different perspectives. But this is not an issue unique to Muslims, right? Like, same thing in with the Bible, right? Like, there are some different interpretations of that text, but does that mean there are no queer Christians, or that people don't struggle with that in different ways? Like,
right.
Of course they do.
I can speak on this a little bit, without going on too far of a tangent, because we could definitely prep, and maybe that would actually be interesting to prep like a whole episode on this.
Don't move the microphone around. Yeah.
We could maybe prep a whole episode on this. But the general understanding for both Muslims and Christians is that the story of Lot, who was a prophet that was sent to people, that the people that were punished, that were not receiving the prophet's message, were punished because they were having sex unconsensually, because it was rape and not because it was sodomy. That's sort of the interpretation that, for people who it matters, who not everyone cares, but for people who feel like they have to reconcile the text in some way, that is like the main place that they're looking to. And then in Islam specifically, in addition to that story, which is also in the Bible, there also are some hadith. And then with hadith, it's a kind of a different ballgame, because hadith are like sayings and actions of the Prophet Muhammad, but the Quran is the direct word of God. And so hadith are important. You can't just like throw them out willy-nilly, but they are more subject to human error because they were like preserved through a transmission of humans. So there are various hadith, and people kind of like take them on a case-by-case basis. And there's also very little about like same-sex interaction between women.
Yeah.
Just because that was not like something that the mostly male jurists, not in the beginning of Islam, but like more during the Abbasid era, so like 900s through like 1200s, it just didn't really think about women probably in that way. So it also shows like sexuality really is, and gender really are like historically situated.
Yeah.
And so there's a really good book that I've only read like about half of, to be honest. I would love to finish, by Khalid Rahab, called Before Homosexuality. I will say there's better books if you want like Scott Kugel is the main person who writes about like queerness in Islam, both like theologically and in terms of more of like a sociological perspective. Khalid Rahab doesn't have the same investment in like queer Muslim community. And so Before Homosexuality kind of bothered everyone, but his main thing was just like homosexuality is a contemporary concept, but that doesn't mean that there hasn't always been what we now think of as sex and gender diversity. Of course there has been, but this kind of idea of like gender and sex as being tied to identity, even the way we think about identity, all these things are relatively contemporary and just not a historically stable category. And so when you talk about things as if they've always been, it just doesn't work in the same way. And one of the most actually interesting places for this is, I think that if you like look at the Prophet's life, it is harder to find clear, obvious examples of like, oh, these were same-sex couples, right? But there actually is pretty clear evidence for people who are neither men or women, for people who today we would recognize as trans. And that's something that's actually documented in Hadith. So even that is really interesting. Like they're just
trans
people,
or like non-binary or intersex.
So non-binary probably, again, like they didn't use these terms, so it's hard to say.
Right.
But non-binary
Well, I
probably.
don't think they were doing like. I mean, yeah, okay, yeah.
Well, sometimes, I mean, in a lot of like Islamic courts, there were eunuchs, so they were doing some sex.
Yeah.
So it's tricky. But in the Prophet's time, it seems like there are more people than we would expect to just be intersex. So it just seems like they just were recognized as neither men or women. And there was even like hadith about like where they should be in prayer. And like one of the Prophet's wives, Hafsa, was friends with someone from this group. And it doesn't seem to have been a massive issue. And so it's tricky because I think on the one hand, you don't want to like project backwards and be like, well, this was a trans community, because like I doubt they would have known what you meant if you were to say that. But it clearly shows that there was like a community that was neither male or female in the ways that those roles meant at that time.
Yeah.
So, and it's just interesting because like today, like being trans is on the vanguard, or kind of like, maybe that's a weird way to put it, but like it is the most attacked of the LGBTQ communities. And in a lot of ways, like many conservative Muslims and also conservative Christians in this country seem to be more comfortable with people being lesbian or gay than they are with people being trans.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that there's like almost more of like a historical corollary for that category. So yeah, none of it is like linear. Does that make sense? I don't know.
That makes sense. I mean, I think the justification that was given in the that open letter that all those imams signed, like the textual reference that was cited over and over was this passage in the Quran about cutting the ear of a cattle or something like that. And,
They also had the story of Lot in there, but they also had some really random citations. Yeah.
yeah. And I think I've heard Christians talk about the story of Lot about the punishment was because they were inhospitable.
Interesting. I've mostly heard like feminist readings and queer inclusive readings from both Christian and Muslim theologians being about rape.
Consensuality?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I mean that part is clear in the text, but
I grew up in the South, so I guess we don't really not much consent, but we're big on hospitality.
yeah, maybe there's some regional variation.
Yeah, that's the Southern Baptist interpretation.
That's so funny. If anyone's curious, by the way, I just wanted to make sure that I was remembering how to pronounce the term right. But it's muhannath, the term for like people who were neither male or female in the Prophet's time. Yeah, sorry, just one more thing about like trans people. We should do, actually now I'm convinced. I want to prep an episode on this. I think it would be good. But there also like historically have been a lot of like not binary gendered people in like Muslim societies generally. Like that is not like that new of a concept for Muslims. Like in South Asia, the Hijra community was like very revered in like Mughal times, and unfortunately is like very discriminated against today. Well,
also like, I mean,
people also were always gay, you know, like
I know this doesn't have much bearing on like how people live their lives or whatever, but in the Quran there are more kind of perfect beings in heaven that are described as being not man or woman. You know what I'm saying?
That's
like
an interesting angle. Someone should take that angle. I haven't heard that. You're talking about the Houris?
Yeah, like it's
They seem a little androgynous.
well, yeah, aren't they described that way?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I guess this also goes back to like what has been historically the interpretation versus what is like literally written in the text. And like, again, like mostly male interpreters were like, oh, these are some ladies. But you're right, the text is not like that clear. They're just like transparent beings who are beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I'm not saying like one is more perfect than the
Queering
other
the
or whatever.
Houris.
But I guess what I'm saying is that the concept of fluidity or vagueness in appearance and gender, whatever, it just didn't feel as rigid.
Yeah, no, that's
or
interesting.
at least it wasn't something that was just like you must attack, right? Like there is nothing. You can't tell me there's anything that says you must go and kill a gay or trans person.
Yeah, I mean certainly that's
right?
not clearly written.
Like
in the text.
there's nothing that says that.
Well, I mean, if you
and there is something that suggests some level of like, you know, oh, this is not necessarily a bad thing.
I will say I've never heard anyone talk about Houris in this way, but I'm here for it. Like I like it. I just don't know. I haven't like heard that before, but I feel like it's interesting.
Yeah,
you should do something with it.
I can't. I don't know enough.
You could figure.
I'm sure someone's gonna write me an angry message.
Probably.
Yeah. Don't explode into the microphone. By the way.
Why are you giving me so many hot mic tips?
Because I
have to cut them out later.
I can't cut them out because they're at the beginning of a sentence. It's very hard to edit.
It's just hard out here.
Hold
it's
the
hard.
microphone
It's hard to be
away a little bit.
Hard to be
there
me.
you go. Right there.
Hard to be a little Muslim lady on a mic.
I have to edit this and it just really pops in the headphones. Yeah. I'm gonna make you edit an episode.
No, I could never.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I think we'll come back to this topic. So we've got a lot of thoughts, and there's a good list of readings that we could go through a bit.
Yeah.
But much love to our queer Muslim community.
I will say, I think the most important thing is we need more Muslim spaces that are queer inclusive.
For sure.
I continue to be very disappointed in almost every masjid in the U.S. and a lot probably beyond the U.S. borders, but that just don't feel like an inclusive space.
Right.
And not just definitely for queer people, but also just a lot of people. Like, they just don't feel like interesting dynamic spaces where you can like really make things happen.
Not that we've tried that much, to be fair. But yes, I agree. They don't feel inherently welcoming.
Yeah.
Maybe you tried more than I did in North Carolina before I met you, but... Okay, do you have another news item? I have one more roundup. We gotta talk about the really ridiculous things. We just have to.
What?
The Israeli violence.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. Thanks for reminding me. That was... I want to say hilarious, but it's just like, it's so darkly comic. And this actually really... for those of you who don't know, forever ago, I wrote like a little mini web series back in 2016 about all these white supremacist militia guys who were training for a race war out in the woods. And just kind of the thesis of the show at the time was that, because I'd spent a lot of time reading about all these different white supremacist organizations, going on their sites, reading their bylaws, watching videos of them. And in a moment when everyone was kind of freaking out about this rising fascism and like these people are the most dangerous thing since blah, 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 but doing so in a way that felt like it was giving them a lot of credit for being organized. When what I saw was that these people are buffoons and they're actually quite stupid. And they love to LARP, like live action role play, almost like D&D groups or like people who go out and like do reenactments and like LARP out in the woods or whatever. But their buffoonery can every once in a while lead to a lot of danger, and it endangers a lot of people, right? So that there is something to be cautious about, but there's really no underlying ideology. It's just kind of like this libidinal, crazy energy that people act downstream of. And that's what we saw here today, is that like it's absolute buffoonery of this Jewish guy who I don't know if he was Israeli or not.
I think he was just Jewish American.
He's just a Jewish American guy who went and shot two people who he thought were Palestinians on a Miami beach. And it turns out they were both Jewish Israelis who I guess were vacationing there or something. But to add on to it, one of the victims of the shooting had posted on Facebook something to the effect of like, they tried to kill us for nationalist reasons, like I guess thinking that they were targeted because they were Israelis and Jewish. And so I'm guessing he assumed the perpetrator, whatever, was like a Palestine sympathetic or Arab or something.
Yeah.
And was like, death to all Arabs in his post.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's kind of like that Spider-Man meme.
Right,
like
right.
They're all
like
just like
pointing at yourself.
Pointing at each other. Yeah. Or the other meme is, that it's like two frames and one is like you see a little kid and he's like crying because he has a boot on his head, like someone's like stomping on his head, and then the second frame is zoomed out and it's just like the kid with his hand in the boot, putting it on his own head.
No, it's so silly. It feels like such an Onion article. It's so worthy of caricature. I mean, it is obviously very scary in that there are people who are radicalized enough that they're shooting at random people, and like that person could have, I mean, first of all, it's still a person, like no one should be shot at randomly.
Yeah.
I mean, second of all, they could have been Palestinian or Arab. I also think it's interesting because I feel like it shows that the average American, like whatever your background, can't really distinguish between people from this region. And also like, not to get too weird with it, but like when we're talking about like what does it mean stereotypically to look Arab or like phenotypically Jewish, it's like pretty much the same thing. Like curly haired people, like beautiful strong features. Like obviously there's so many different ways that people look Arab. There's so many different, even within like Jewish communities, there are people of like European descent and people of Middle Eastern descent and whatever. But like it's just kind of ironic that this person felt so confident that they could identify someone, and they were so wrong.
Yeah.
And obviously scary that they were so motivated by hate and so willing to just like shoot someone randomly.
Yeah.
It's definitely not getting enough mainstream news coverage. If this had been like...
Yeah, I read it on the Times of Israel.
It's so funny, really.
Yeah, I read the story on Times of Israel.
I read it on Mondo Weiss, which is like an American outlet. It does a lot of excellent Palestine, but it focuses on Palestine, so that's why I read it there.
Yeah. Times of Israel conveniently omitted the Facebook post.
Okay, gotcha.
They talked about the Facebook post about, oh, they tried to kill us for nationalism, but they totally omitted the death to Arabs
part.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like there's not much else to say about that. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
I may have said this before on the podcast. I can't remember, but Ahmed's screenplay that he was writing, which was called just White Power, right? Mm-hmm. Was one of the first things we talked about when I met him, and I thought it was really cool. Yeah. And I remain, I don't want to say the only advocate, but I feel like I'm the person that I've met who loves that screenplay the most. I really love it. I think it's really brilliant, ahead of its time.
It's cursed, actually. Anytime I send it to someone, they never talk to me again.
Except for me. I talk to you again, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think you sent it to me pretty early on in us dating.
Yeah.
And I really loved it. Though I did once in a coffee shop. I think I was like, I love your white power.
I love white power, yeah.
It was not enough context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sadly, all the networks are too cowardly to make it.
I feel like now it almost actually just feels too real. Like, I don't know if it would be as funny or as dark humor now that there's like a neo-Nazi who was unelected who's running so much of government.
Yeah.
And even like the kidnapping sequence kind of happened in Michigan. So I feel like, yeah. All right. Last news item that I had, I wanted to do a little roundup of like Trump administration and education. So we talked about NIH grants. I think that was last episode, right? Mm-hmm. A federal judge has halted the Trump administration's cuts to NIH research payments in 22 states, so that's good. That's currently basically getting played out in the courts. Mm-hmm. There is a new alarming thing. This is an Inside Higher Ed article. Basically, in a sweeping and unprecedented letter, I'm just going to read from the article a little bit, issued over the weekend, the Office for Civil Rights declared race-based scholarships, cultural centers, and even graduation ceremonies illegal. So DEI violates civil rights law is kind of the angle that the education department is going for. And this is having pretty immediate consequences. I mean, by spineless admin, but it's become a little cliche, but this is a really good example of that whole obeying in advance thing. Instead of waiting for this to get played out in the courts, as it will have to be, or like waiting for any kind of, enforcement mechanism, a number of schools have started to like change their websites.
Yep.
Have started to like even tell teachers that they have to start to retool their curriculum. It's Black History Month, and so people are under a lot of pressure to like think about what they're going to be talking about and how. But it's also just flies in the face of like all education research, especially kind of demonizing like affinity group type groups. Research strongly supports and has for decades that having groups, for example, like a Black Student Union or a Muslim Student Association or whatever at a college level, helps with graduation rates. It helps with students staying enrolled. And that especially minority students, upon going to college at predominantly white institutions, PWIs, it's not a question of merit or aptitude, but just feel overwhelmed culturally and like need community. And so, yeah, I mean, they obviously are just setting up these students who are minorities, but when you take together, actually make up a very significant number of our students.
Yeah.
Not to fail, because I'm sure that our students will always persevere and find ways to organize. And the other thing about like these kind of affinity groups is that they cross over with one another. They help educate the broader student body. They help create like fun cultural programming. They don't exist in isolation. It's not like a segregation thing, right? I feel like half of my college, my fun parts of my college, because I didn't love my college experience, it was all right, was like going to like different cultural nights and just like eating food and like experiencing stuff. And so to demonize that is so strange. And it's not a great sign. And this was like kind of an extreme case, but over the weekend, Pete Hegseth's wife, so Pete Hegseth
Secretary of Defense.
Is the Secretary of Defense. So his wife was supposed to visit some like NATO schools abroad, so like American schools abroad in Belgium. And the teachers panicked so much that these were the things that within 24 hours they stripped off the walls of the school. Origami paper cranes, I guess celebrating Japanese culture, rainbows, queer inclusive, and Harriet Tubman posters. So pretty fucking rough. This is just like, basically the Trump administration has made DEI the new boogeyman. It's like almost like Red Scare, like anything that has to do with, and it's also making it so that really only a narrative of America as being white, and not just white, but like cis and straight, is something that is okay to teach in a classroom context. And even teaching about like Harriet Tubman could be brainwashing children, which is insane because it's just like American history. Yeah, and she ended up not going because she was busy. So they stripped the walls for nothing. But yeah, I mean, look, I understand that job security is scary and everything. I mean, I'm literally a specialist. I work on Islam and race, so like I feel like I have no choice but to teach what I teach. But yeah, it is definitely depressing.
I mean, soon the whole curriculum will just be replaced by the PragerU videos. Have you been following the Elon Musk kind of rapid fire like mistakes that they've been making in all the different
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of hilarious. As someone who holds himself out as being like a really smart entrepreneur who avoids stupidity because he's just like, I understand what I'm doing before I do it, right? Like I don't suffer fools, and like we make sure that we hire the best, and I understand the physics behind SpaceX, and I understand the programming behind Twitter, and you don't need X, Y, whatever, blah blah blah. It seems like they're making a lot of mistakes. Like in the one thing that's really scary is that one of his developers had access to like the treasury payment systems that like moves trillions of dollars a year, and I think it's still unknown whether he had read and write access to the database or to the code, or if it was just read access. But if it was write access, and like no one could, he could have written something into that code. And I was listening to an interview about this, and it is something very scary because those systems, the people who work on those treasury, like, you know, the software systems or the payment, whatever, have been there forever. And the code is written in COBOL, which is a really old language that no one really like knows or learns anymore.
Interesting.
And like syntactically, and I guess like the way that you think about that language or the way that you think about what you're doing in that language is very different from the newer languages that are very like theoretical and all this shit. COBOL, I think, is not like that. And so you have these like new people in this old system who don't really know what they're doing is kind of scary. These systems you rely on them, right? Like you rely on them to make sure people get their social security, any number of payments, like probably payments to, you know, between governmental agencies to other governments, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It was important that everyone who was working on these systems back in 2020, when the government had to issue all these like PPP loans and the relief payments, those only worked because this system was working and because people who knew what they were doing were testing the system beforehand and made sure that it could handle that stress, right? So that's concerning. He came out and was like, oh, we actually found that there were people who are 150 years old getting Social Security. And that was something that we took care of. Like, he's holding it out as this thing. Did you hear about this?
But he showed no evidence, right?
Well, he can't show evidence because it's, again, like a fundamental misunderstanding. Like, you just find a quirk in the database, and instead of figuring out why it exists, you're trying to hold it out as an example of Democratic Party overspend.
Yeah.
Right? You're saying, oh, clearly someone's scamming the American taxpayer.
Right.
If I had to guess, he was holding it out as an issue and trying to illustrate it as, oh, this person died forever ago,
And they're still getting payments
still
somehow,
getting
yeah.
payments, or someone's scamming the government. But when you think about it, you're like, okay, Social Security hasn't existed for 150 years. So
Right? What's the story? Yeah.
two, I watched some videos on this. The reason it happens is due to a quirk of the programming language. So some languages
Interesting.
have a native like date, time, you can store it as such or whatever, and if there's no date, it reverts back to the epoch of that language, so like when it was kind of started. So in like one language it's 1970, right? So if there's no date, or if it's zero or whatever, it'll just default to 1970, which is when that epoch began. For COBOL and like whatever, I guess the system is in, the epoch began in like whenever the international standard date time stuff was negotiated in some treaty,
Interesting.
which is like 1870,
Something.
right?
Gotcha.
1875, 150 years ago.
Interesting.
And so clearly there were zero or like null values or whatever in the database, or there was no actual date for certain entries in the database. And so it said 1870, 150 years ago. And Musk and his people just look at that and be like, oh my God, I can't believe someone who died however many years ago is still receiving Social Security, even though they don't stop to think, oh, did the Social Security payment system exist
Right.
150
Like, what does
years
this mean?
ago?
And you're right. This is also a good example of like these people are not even technical or skilled. Like, it's like a group of like mostly 20.
It's a ragtag team of like
boy
just barely-
incel boys.
Still
Like,
somewhat pubescent. Like,
yeah.
this 19-year-olds.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. And the same kind of stuff we're talking about education, like also so many like federal agencies are trying to like scrub their websites of anything that could be like misinterpreted as DEI.
Yeah.
There was that ridiculous example of like they cut a bunch of things, or they tried to cut a bunch of programs that had the word transition because they
Yeah.
were like clamping down on gender stuff. But then they cut something that was like a job transition program
For Down syndrome.
for people with
People.
disability.
Yeah.
So just like all sorts of imprecision.
Yeah. And then they tried to say, oh, we're sending $50 million of condoms to Hamas
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Gaza. And it was Gaza, Mozambique or
Yeah,
something like
somewhere
that.
in Africa. At least he admitted to that one. Yeah. It's kind of interesting to me. I'm not surprised by how awful Trump is, obviously, but I am surprised that like there's not more infighting between Elon and Trump. I hope that happens eventually.
Well, they did a joint, hold the microphone farther away, but they did a joint interview where
It was a press conference. I watched it. Yeah. It was mostly just Elon talking. It was interesting.
Yeah, which I'm like, because people are saying, obviously now people are like, oh, is it Elon that really runs the government?
Seems
And-
like
and
it.
Trump is just his patsy.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it.
Hold the microphone farther away. Farther away.
Stop.
No. Okay. Yeah, if you want to get rid of the appearance of like not being someone's patsy, doing a joint press conference where he talks and is like, no, that's not what's happening, is definitely a surefire way to dispel those rumors.
I think that Trump really likes wealth, and because Elon's the most wealthy man in the world, like that, maybe he doesn't feel like insecure about being surpassed by him. He just kind of feels like he's associated with him. I don't know, but I hope eventually that they explode. I feel like they will.
What, their relationship or
Yeah.
their bodies?
Both. But I hope their relationship, for security reasons, I more specifically hope their relationship
Musk
explodes.
looks like he's gonna explode anytime. So like, okay, I was gonna say like that first where he's just like holds out his kid. His kid. I'm sorry, I don't
say anything about kids.
I don't make it my business to just be like, but the kid has this like gremlin energy to him. Like he
Well,
has
the
this,
poor
like,
kid is such a like humanizing prop. It's so awkward, and its name is his name is X, which is also so stupid. Like
Yeah.
all of his branding, it's so creepy and weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the whole thing.
He had
is
another
weird.
kid. Did you hear about that recently?
No, he's definitely got some kind of fetish.
I mean, he has his only ideology is that he should have as many kids as possible.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's this young woman. I don't know how old she is. She's got to be 20 something. Ashley St. Clair. she just came out and was like, "Oh, media is going to leak this anyway." But I just had a kid 5 months ago. It's Elon's kid, and then someone brought up some old tweets of hers that are like 5 years old, when she was just like, "Oh, does anyone know how to meet Elon Musk? I hear he
It's that easy.
I hear he wants to have a bunch of children and goes through women really quickly." And I was just and like I think it was Milo Yiannopoulos who like tweeted it and was like, "Oh, clearly she's been plotting to do this for half a decade." And then Musk retweeted that and was just like, "Whoa." And then she tweeted and was like trying to get a hold of Elon Musk, saying that like, "Oh, you're not responding to messages." So seems like maybe there's something going on, but who knows? This could all be just like media spectacle.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, he definitely wants to. Where does that come from? The desire to have so many children from so many different women? Like, kind of colonize, take over? I don't know.
It's
Spread your seed.
yeah. These are like the natalist kind of breeding people.
Yeah. Something.
Like they're just like, oh, the best people in society should reproduce the most.
So I'll do that.
Yeah.
Some of his kids are old enough to be like, I hate my dad, though. So he didn't really think that through.
Well, I think the really weird thing is that he does a lot of these babies through IVF, and they select mostly boys.
Interesting. I didn't know
Almost
that.
all of them are boys. Yeah.
That is weird. Well, the one girl really hates him, so maybe that's why.
Yep.
Yeah, that's so strange. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah, I think they're all boys.
Except for the one daughter who hates him.
I guess so. Yeah.
Interesting. Weird.
Which I guess his thinking is they'll go out and then they'll spread their seed, which is a lineage of mine.
So like some of the stuff that's happening now feels kind of like medieval or like kind of like feudal.
Yeah.
It's like really boring.
No, it is feudal.
Yeah.
We're just kind of, I think once the U.S. government collapses, it'll have reverberations for obviously the global economy, but we'll just have to decide. It won't be states anymore, really. I think it'll be like what companies you pledge allegiance to.
Yeah, I know you've had that theory for a while. That could come to pass. What I hope happens is just like the UK. Not that the UK is some shining great place, but I hope that we just exist as a non-empire and like find new form. Hard to say.
No, we got to figure out which company.
We gotta pledge allegiance.
Yeah.
They're all bad.
Ben and Jerry's is okay.
That's true. Ben and Jerry's is pretty cute.
But they're owned by Unilever, so that's not okay.
What's Unilever?
Exactly. Massive conglomerate.
But isn't Ben and Jerry's like pro BDS?
Yeah.
All right. I could get behind that.
Yeah, but I mean, you wouldn't be pledging to Ben and Jerry's. You'd be pledging to Unilever, which I'm sure doesn't care about BDS. Yeah. Is that it?
Yeah. Stay safe, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Bye.